Okay, today we pick up with Chapter 5, Political Parties. So, political parties, what are they and what do they do? Well, a political party is a group of people who seek to control government through the winning of elections and the holding of public office. So, that is what they are. That's what they do. They are trying to control government by winning public office and keeping that office and having that power. So, in the U.S., we have major parties, and major parties are the dominant political parties. And in the U.S., we have two. We have the Democrats and the Republicans. And in both cases, you could call them a coalition. A coalition is a union of many people with diverse interests who come together to get their candidates elected to public office. Both the Republicans and the Democrats have a wide variety of people who belong to their party. Not all Democrats agree on the same things. Not all Republicans agree on the same things. And so they would definitely be called a coalition, that they are, trying to bring people together of very diverse issues or diverse interests. So what do these parties do? Basically, they have 5 functions. The first is that it's a nominating function, that basically they nominate or name candidates for office, and this is pretty much exclusively a party function. That's what they do, is they nominate people for office. The second is an informer and stimulator function, that as the informer, they are campaigning, they take stands, they criticize the other party to inform people about what's going on. And then the stimulator part of it is that they are trying to get people's interest by having speeches and rallies and putting up signs and putting up ads in order to get people's interest in that candidate or in that party. The third function is the seal of approval function, and basically this just means that they're going to give their seal of approval to the candidates or the office holders, basically saying that we ensure that they're going to do a good job, or that they're qualified and that they have good character, that they're someone that we put our faith and trust in. The fourth function is a governmental function, and this is going to allow the legislative and executive branches to work together, rather than butting heads all the time, trying to get them to work together as much as possible. It doesn't always work, but that's what they try and do. The fifth is a watchdog function, and kind of what it sounds like, that they are watching the other party. They criticize the policies and the behavior of the party. They also, of the opposite party, they try to be responsible to the wishes and concerns of the people, trying to make sure that they're watching out for the best interest of everybody, not just a select few. So that's what they're supposed to do, and sometimes they do it and sometimes they don't. But that we do have in the U.S. a two-party system, and that just means that we have two parties that dominate the American politics. We do have minor parties, and minor parties are those that are less widely supported. They're also called third parties. So those minor parties are third parties. We have them, we just don't see them in the spotlight as much. And the reason for that is that we have several reasons why we have a two-party system, just a two-party system. The first is a historical basis, that since the beginning of the United States, we have always had two parties, and that started all the way back with the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. So even as far back as before we had the Constitution, we had a two-party system. And kind of tied in with that, the second reason is tradition. The fact that there has always been a two-party system feeds into it a lot, that we will always have a two-party system. The third is the electoral system, and the electoral system actually promotes a two-party system. It would be very difficult to have our current electoral system with more than two parties. It would make things very, very challenging. And so it discourages minor parties, and so we usually only have those two choices. Now, the two-party system is not the only system out there. There are various other systems as well, including the multi-party system. And the multi-party system has several major parties and a lot of lesser parties as well, a lot of minor parties. Most European democracies today are a multi-party system. Usually the parties that are involved in the multi-party system are based on some particular interest. So maybe it's based on religion, or it's based on economic class, or it's based on political ideology. But typically it has one focus and not everything as their focus, like our two-party system. Another system is the one-party system, and the one-party system allows only one political party. It's also known as the no-party system. So within your one party, you can have multiple people running for the office, and they could be fighting about different things. But it can also be a dictatorship. So you can still have like a democracy that's a one party, but you can also have a dictatorship that's a one party. So it depends on how it's run and who's in charge. The membership of parties here in the United States, it's entirely voluntary. You don't have to be a member of a party if you don't want to. You can be independent. You do not have to become a member. And typically those that do become a member of the party have a strong party identification, that maybe their family or their economic status or their age or whatever is going to influence whether or not they become a member. So the two-party system in American history, like I said, it can be traced all the way back to the ratification of the Constitution. When you look at the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, there are some distinct differences, and that's going to lead to the birth of our modern-day two-party system. With the Federalists, the leader was Alexander Hamilton, and he believed in a very strong national government. He believed in the rich and the well-born, that they should be the ones in power. And so he was very big on financial interests and manufacturing interests. And he also wanted a very liberal interpretation of the Constitution, that you can read between the lines kind of thing. And because of that, if you liberally interpret the Constitution, the strongest branch would be the executive branch. The Anti-Federalists, led by Thomas Jefferson, were strongly in favor of a limited national government. They wanted the state governments to be stronger. They also believed heavily in the common man, that our government needs to benefit the common people because they can't always have a voice. They don't always have the time. So he was a big proponent of farmers and laborers. He also wanted strict interpretation, that if it doesn't say it in the Constitution, it shouldn't happen, sort of thing. And with that in mind, that would make the legislative branch the strongest branch. So, between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, eventually we see this first clash between these two groups, and that will be in the election of 1796. George Washington decided he wasn't going to run for a third term, and so we have the election of 1796 between John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. Now, John Adams was running under the Federalist Party, and Jefferson, as the leader of the Anti-Federalists, eventually they adopt the name of the Democratic Republicans. And so you have basically the Federalists versus the Anti-Federalists, except the Anti-Federalists had changed their names. But John Adams is actually going to defeat Jefferson in the election of 1796. And so we get that different ideology coming out. So we also have, like I said, in the U.S. we have minor parties. And the minor parties are very hard to classify because there's so many of them and there's such a large variety of them. There are 4 types that we can kind of narrow it down to. The first type is an ideological party, and an ideological party is based on a particular set of beliefs, that they have a set belief in mind. So like the socialists or the communists would be an example of an ideological party. The second is a single issue party, and a single issue party concentrates on a single issue, something that matters to them. And good examples of the single issue parties could be the Right to Life Party, which deals with abortion, or the Free Soil, which was opposed to the spread of slavery back in the 1800s. You have the Marijuana Party today, which is talking about legalizing marijuana. So they have a single issue that they concentrate on. The third is economic protest parties, and these happen during times of economic troubles when our economy is in a decline. And so this could be like the Greenback Party, which was created again during the 1800s when there's a lot of farm problems. It could include things like the 99% or the economic parties that developed out of the Great Recession of 2012 or 2011. The fourth are splinter parties, and splinter parties are those that split away from the major parties. So they have some difference with the major party that they don't like, so they split away and create their own party. For example, the American Independent Party split away from the Democrats. They didn't like some of the things that the Democrats were saying, so they split away. Now, you have parties like the Reform Party under Ross Perot, which was in the 1990s, and it does not fall under any of these categories. It's not an ideological, it's not single issue, it's not a splinter, it's not economic protest. So, it's very, very different, so it doesn't fall in any of these categorizations. Instead, his party, the Reform Party, built their campaign around Ross Perot, so it was around his personality and his views. And so very, very different development. Now, the key role of the minor parties, these third parties take away votes from the major parties, and that's how they can become very, very important in election years. They also serve as a critic and an innovator. They are able to take clear-cut stands on issues where the major parties typically are not. The major parties tend to be wishy-washy about a lot of stuff, and these third parties can say, no, this is the way it has to be. They can take these real clear-cut stands on these issues, and they can force the major parties to do the same thing because they can say the American people are behind us, and if you want this particular view, you need to vote for us. And that forces those major parties to at least acknowledge them. Now, the biggest complaint of these minor parties is that the major parties tend to take their ideas and present them as their own. So they steal their ideas. They're the ones coming up with these ideas and coming up with these plans, and it's the major parties that kind of take them over and say, oh, we came up with this too. And so that's kind of the biggest complaint that they have, that they're not always given the credit where they need to have it given.